Before I invite Liz Saville Roberts to give us the Justice Unions Parliamentary Group report, there has been a debate in the Lords this afternoon on IPP sentences, and Lord Fred Ponsonby, who is the co-chair of the Justice Union Parliamentary Group, participated in that debate and spoke about our work on IPP sentences quite extensively. By the miracle of technology, we have a very short clip that we're now going to play for you as an excellent introduction to Liz's report to AGM. So we'll watch this short video clip first, and then we will hear from Liz.
My Lords, I wanted to make one one point which is different from the points that have been made by other noble lords, and that is to really speak to the brief from the National Association of Probation Officers who've written to me about this matter. And their point is really covered most fully in paragraphs 93 and 94 of the JSC report. In a nutshell, it's about resourcing. It's about allowing probation officers to do their job properly, to have training, and to provide resources for the offenders once they've been released and they are out in the community. It's no accident that there is not adequate support and there is a high level of recall for these prisoners, and that is a problem. And it's a problem which can be partially addressed by the government recognising there is an additional training and resource element for the probation service. And I hope the Noble Lord the Minister will specifically address that point, because it's one which I've been asked to raise here today.
And thank you, Lord Fred, for the sterling work you do for us. It's now my pleasure to introduce Liz Saville Roberts MP, who is co-chair of the Justice Union Parliamentary Group, and she will give the parliamentary report to AGM. Welcome, Liz.
I'd rather hope you wouldn't be able to see my boots, but you can. Right, well, thank you very much for the invitation again, Katie and Ian, and I'm delighted that you've been able to hear some of the parliamentary group's work actually in action with Fred just now. And I was just thinking actually in preparation for today, I don't know how many of you heard Thought for Today on Radio 4 this morning, and the speaker was Dr. Michael Banner of Trinity College, Cambridge, and he discussed the uncomfortable challenge of Christian approaches to punishment posed by an exhibition that's opening tomorrow in the Museum of London Docklands with the extraordinary title of 700 Years of Public Executions in London. And I think this probably is close to the heart of many of you here. It's certainly close to mine, but he questioned whether the proper way to respond to a crime is indeed with punishment. There is an alternative, he said, which is that a breach in the social order certainly needs repair, but that repair might involve a host of responses, none of them to do with retribution or vengeance. And I think with the government that we presently have, it's very refreshing to hear such a voice also being heard. But back to the day job, I'd like to update you on the political work we're doing in Westminster and beyond in raising the profile of probation and highlighting the major challenges you and your colleagues face every day. I hope you've all read this year's parliamentary report. It's in detail. It gives you the names of the parliamentarians who have raised issues and the issues they have raised. And it gives you a very good flavour of what we've been doing up to now on your behalf along the corridors of power, many of them filled with rather depressed looking Tories on their phones at the moment. And as many of you will know, much of Napo's campaigning is done through the Justice Unions Parliamentary Group, which I chair along with Lord Fred Ponsonby, who I think is with you tomorrow as well, speaking tomorrow. The parliamentary group stands up for workers across the criminal justice system, probation officers, prison officers, and see Mark in the darkness over there from the POA, and other staff, court workers, police and more. And of course, we work closely with the relevant unions, including Napo. We're a cross-party group. I mean, of course, that's the essence of why these groups are successful. I'm a member of Plaid Cymru, Fred is from Labour. We also have Tories actively involved, as well as Scottish Nationalists, Lib Dems, Independents, bishops and peers. And a main focus for us, of course, has been holding the government to account for the unmanageable workloads in probation, which are, we know, causing you such terrible problems. Of course, the roots of this crisis lie in the Tories' disastrous probation privatisation programme, Transforming Rehabilitation TR, which saw the profit-hungry CRCs shed jobs as fast as they could get their hands on the funding for the payroll, frankly, as a way of maximising their profits. But even though the government eventually admitted defeat and pulled the plug on this dangerous experiment, the workload crisis just seems to have got progressively worse and not better. And of course, a workload crisis in probation is a very serious matter. You don't need me to tell you that it can be a matter of life or death, where any mistake or wrong decision can have devastating, even fatal consequences. So, morale and retention are at rock bottom. Resignations are at record rates, and the vicious circle continues. More staff leave, leading to even larger workloads, leading to more staff leaving, and so on in a vicious circle. None of this is disputed. Less than a fortnight ago, the Chief Inspector of Probation wrote in his report on SFO's serious further offences that, looking at the failings in the system, excessive workloads, and I quote, often underpin the practice deficits identified. He added, and I will continue to quote because I think this is so powerful, concerns about workload are not limited to caseload numbers, but also reflect the volume and pace of change in policy and practice. High workloads can cause stress and reduce the time available for reflective and considered practice. Workload issues are exacerbated by challenges in recruitment, retention and resourcing, particularly following the impact of TR. New practitioners can feel inexperienced and can lack relevant training and development opportunities, which further reduces their confidence in working with complex or challenging cases. This is damning, of course. The link between excessive workloads and serious further offences couldn't be clearer. But the question, of course, is what the government is doing about it. Now, I am particularly proud to say, in seeking to, if you like, myself, I'm very aware of the fact that I'm not a practitioner, I'm standing before you today, but I was very grateful and a really interesting experience in spending Wednesday last week at the Carnarvon office of the North Wales Probation Delivery Unit, PDU. And I had the opportunity to talk about the challenges of designing effective service provision in remote rural areas, such as the constituency which I represent, which, if you like, is South Gwynedd, which you probably know as the coast of places like Barmouth and Snowdonia, beautiful but remote. And I saw dedicated probation officers, probation support officers as administrators, and how they work together day to day. The commitment, their commitment, your commitment to this work was obvious. Interestingly, sadly, if you like, that North Wales PDU has a total of 205 staff, all told, so I was told. And it was good to learn that they have 50 trainees, but they also have 27 vacancies. And again, the high number of trainees, although obviously welcome, that obviously also places an extra strain on the experienced staff. So the truth is that the Tories broke our award-winning exemplar probation service, and they now need to take responsibility and fix it, first and foremost by prioritising staff retention. And there are. And you're better placed than me to tell me. It's evidently to do with conditions, it's evidently to do with workload, and it's evidently to do with pay at a cost of living, time of a cost of living crisis. And I do think that Britain needs a pay rise as well with the motion. Of course, once again, we have a new Prime Minister, a new Justice Secretary, and a new Probation Minister. All of them represent opportunities to raise the profile of your profession and put new pressure on your employer to treat you better. And please don't ever forget the key role that you and your union played in forcing the government's dramatic U-turn over TR. We're seeing U-turns like this at the moment, but I think that was, I saw that played out in slow motion. I saw it played out as well that in Wales the change first happened. But I mean, that really was a combination of pressures from yourselves and from parliamentarians and from outside. And of course, there were some shocking events that led to that change happening. And of course, the government really didn't want to admit defeat, but they couldn't deny the chaos they created. And as the voice, of course, of frontline probation workers, again, your union should have that voice in making sure that these misjudgments of government, miscarriages of justice, the work that you do as a union is critical in making sure that this isn't just something that is ignored by the right-wing press. You have a voice and a responsibility, and you're very successful at getting it out there. So it's more important now than ever that Napo is speaking up, because sometimes you really have to wonder whether the MOJ or HMPPS have got any kind of grip on the crisis that we're facing, even if they understand how bad it's got. It's that sense of, the frog's in the water is getting hotter and hotter. But when do they actually realise that the boiling point is fatal? So let me give you just a specific example of how we operate. Select committees are an important tool for holding government departments to account. And you can read, of course, in the parliamentary report about a recent session of the Science and Technology Committee, who were looking at the evidence base for parole board decisions. And in this session, Dr. Joe Farah, who we must remember has held a number of leadership positions at HMPPS, endeavoured to reassure the committee by insisting that, and again I'm quoting, we currently have a reducing reoffending programme. Well, to be honest, let's hope that we do have. Reducing reoffending should be something that's pretty much central to everything that HMPPS does, and it shouldn't really just be siloed off there in a specific research programme. But then to the Science and Technology Committee, she revealed some of the fruits of this work and explaining that there has been research to show that employment, education, and wait for it, accommodation on release are the three things that make a real difference. Get that, the big reveal. It's early days, but the early evidence of this research seems to suggest that particularly accommodation is significant. Yes, having a roof over your head actually makes you less likely to reoffend. That is undoubtedly true. And I would say it's blindingly obvious to me. I think it's probably even more blindingly obvious to you. And it's a bit worrying that your employer is feeling that this is the message they need to convey to MPs, as if it's the result of valuable research rather than just a long established professional article of faith. And if it takes a special programme to come up with conclusions like this, it really is no wonder that we are seeing a system in crisis with some prisoners, and I have heard of this myself back in the day a little bit with HMP Swansea, literally being given tents on release because they have nowhere to live. It's disgraceful. And if you'll just to touch slightly on the situation in Wales now, was this is exactly the area where what we now refer to in Wales as the jagged edge of the reserved criminal justice system and how it interfaces with devolved support services such as housing and health really are challenging for us. Housing and of course the responsibility for preventing homelessness lies with Welsh Government, and it's a policy aim which is not effectively aligned to the Westminster controlled criminal justice system at present. There are different, I am very proud to say, there are different values. Plaid Cymru and the Welsh Labour government in Wales share many of these values. We have different values to those which are driving the Westminster government. I don't think I really need to emphasise that. Now, for example, the removal of priority need for prison leavers in Housing Act Wales 2014 was driven at that time by several factors, which included the low levels of housing stock and pressures on local authority staff in finding accommodation for prison leavers. This saw a grim increase in ex-offenders sleeping in tents outside prisons like HMP Swansea. In the year 2019-20, fewer than half of those released from prison custody who were managed by probation services in Wales went into settled accommodation. That has since changed. I think this is important to emphasise. Since COVID, with the recognition of ex-offenders as vulnerable by Welsh Government, and there has been and there remains a concerted drive to support rough sleepers. Nonetheless, the constitutional inability of Welsh Government to control or even influence upstream factors still has an immense impact on the rate and timing of demand for housing for prison leavers. This includes the rapid rise in prison leavers from an ever-expanding prison population, the long distance from home addresses, which reduces the likelihood of prison leavers seeking support services, and the fact that Welsh prisoners have been widely dispersed across England, making it even hard to know when and where the demand will arise when they return to Wales. One thing that I'd just like to touch upon, because I am probably irrationally proud of this, but a piece of work which I probably talked about a year ago as due to happen, but the end of last November, there was a groundbreaking conference, the Welsh Justice and Policing Conference, chaired by Labour's Justice Frontbencher Anna McMurran, with speakers Sue McConnell of Napo, Gethin Jones of PCS, Mick Antoniw, the Counsel General for Wales, former Plaid MP Elfyn Llwyd, I think will also be familiar to many of you as the previous chair of the Justice Union Group, and many others. And I'm glad to say that this event led to a series of further discussions in Wales and the intention to establish a cross-party group in the Senedd by the end of the year, because we are seeing again the playing out of the services associated with justice that have devolved, and how to make sure that that is as effective as possible in its provision. There's also a groundbreaking book from Cardiff University assessing the Welsh criminal justice system, and it makes clear where the Welsh criminal justice system is structured differently. A determined whole system approach incorporating all the relevant agencies may well have been able to secure different results. Indeed, as we have seen, this is not possible given the jagged edge of devolved responsibilities and competencies that currently characterises this policy space in Wales. This book's due to be published, I think, next month or this month, very shortly. And the issue of accommodation is just one example of why there's a growing consensus within Wales that justice should be devolved. It would enable us, therefore, to remove the jagged edge and take a whole system approach. And like the rest of the justice system, probation, of course, needs massive investment immediately to make it fit for purpose once again. Instead, the public sector is again facing devastating cuts to pay for Truss's millionaire tax giveaway, unless there has been a U-turn on that in the afternoon, which I suspect Kwasi Kwarteng with the IMF would know nothing about anyway. If there is one public service that should always be over-resourced, if anything, that is probation, given the immense human and financial cost of getting it wrong. You all know this far better than me, but it needs saying and repeating over and again. Transforming rehabilitation, the Tories' probation privatisation experiment was a complete and utter failure, and we've all paid the price for that. You have paid the price. You, because you have seen the service you love and work so hard to deliver, sacrificed on the altar of ideology. Offenders too, because the support they needed to turn their lives around became little more than a tick box exercise to profit-hungry privateers and people seeking punishment and vengeance. And of course, to all of us, the public, we've all paid the price. We have had our safety and our security compromised by a Tory government more committed to private profit than public protection. We simply cannot let them get away with this kind of social and judicial vandalism any longer. That is why Napo and other justice unions are vital in standing up for workers and the future of the profession. I wholeheartedly support the union action being taken across the UK and against a government who we know are hell-bent on decimating our public services. And to close, conference. With your efforts and the ongoing parliamentary work, we can continue to pile the pressure on the government to reverse the willful neglect of probation and make it the first-rate service we know it can be. Diolch yn fawr iawn. Thank you very much.